Welcome to the Global Pulse, a short video series where our experts break down a trending topic in international business and why it matters to you.
Hi, today we'll talk about offshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring, reshoring. We have so many words now that it seems that this decision on where should a company locate its main activities has become more complex in the past few years. So let's look a little bit of the original intention of companies by doing that movement and what has changed, if anything, and then how can we maybe make sense of some of the elements that are going on now. So the offshoring movement started in the 60s, but it picked up more in the 70s, late 70s, when that was together with the change in objective for companies becoming maximize shareholder value. So companies were making rational decisions on where to locate their activities. In that process, they were looking mostly at firm characteristics. So maybe there are some locations where I can do manufacturing for a cheaper price that will make me more competitive. So the whole objective is to make the company more competitive, more profitable. And we will look at different location characteristics. Maybe we'll look at some government incentives, and we'll look at our firm fit, whether we can manage the relationships across different countries. So that type of decision worked very well for companies for a long time. But there are different things that happened that started putting that into question. First element is geopolitical tensions that increased the potential risk of locating if you are in an unfriendly country. That could bring some problems even in the short term for the company. But also elements when we had the COVID pandemic, there were also problems in the supply chain, logistics that showed that there were some risks that companies maybe were not considering when they made those decisions to offshore initially. But those risks are there. They are unpredictable. Who would imagine that we would have a pandemic with so many consequences? But they may happen. So companies started maybe looking at different answers. And for example, there is the friendshoring answer, which is a way to address the geopolitical question that we're going to countries that are more friendly, and there are ways to measure that, or at least to get an approximation of that. And also some companies doing nearshoring to avoid the logistical issues that we saw during the COVID years. So basically we're offshoring, but to closer locations, even if the cost may be slightly higher, but it's more predictable, we don't have as much risks. So that's a movement that has been going on, still within this realm of more rational kind of choice by companies based on new risks that they were not familiar with those risks before. There is some new information, they're adjusting that, and they're adjusting their plans based on those new risks. But there is also this element of reshoring, relocating, for example, manufacturing to the United States. And this reflects also a broader kind of more long-term trend, which is the impact of company decisions on society. So if we think about, okay, if you move your manufacturing facility somewhere else, what's going to happen to the workers, to the people that were there working for you? Okay, they'll probably start working for other companies, so those resources will be redeployed into other uses, sometimes more productive, hopefully, and society would not be worse off. But the process is not that simple. There are some kind of long-term trends. Once you start kind of destroying some of the resources that were together and created some value together, once those resources are now spread and you don't have that capability in the country anymore, that may create some long-term issues for the country, that the country loses some capabilities that are still relevant, and that's a process that is very difficult to revert as well. Once you start that, and if you lose your manufacturing ability in many different areas, it's going to take a long time to recover that, to get those abilities again, if something happens in the world and companies need to reshore their activities. So that's what we are going. Also, one of the things that is going on now is this broader impact of companies on society. But then you may ask, okay, how companies can predict that? I mean, companies are trying to make a rational decision based on their resources and capabilities. So for that, it's one of the areas where we need the visible hand of government, and the US government has been doing different actions, financing companies to reshore, because for companies, reshoring may mean that they will be less competitive, for example, in terms of costs for some time. They are facing companies, they're competing with companies from other parts of the world that may have a better cost structure because they're located in costs with lower labor, in countries with lower labor costs. So that's an issue that we need some actions by the government to give incentives for the companies to make that decision. And that decision is in the best interest of society. So that's why we need government thinking about the long-term impacts of society. And that's a decision that then benefits companies, that companies will not lose their competitive advantage by bringing those activities back to the United States. So that's something that is going on. So there are some changes in the way companies perceive risk, and they are adapting and making different decisions than in the past. But also there is this trend of, okay, some of the consequences of the offshoring process took time, and after 30 years, you start seeing, okay, maybe we should bring back some activities for different reasons, national security, but not only that. And so we have now that movement. For that movement, we need some help from the government, financing and giving incentives so the companies can start reshoring their activities and then creating value in the country. Thank you for watching.